The Book of Ruth is a short yet powerful story that takes place during the time of the Judges. It is a story of love, loyalty, and redemption that highlights God's providence in the lives of ordinary people. The book also reveals how Ruth, a Moabite woman, becomes part of the lineage of King David and eventually Jesus Christ. Structure of Ruth Chapter 1: Naomi's Family and Tragedy. The story begins with Naomi, her husband Elimelech, and their two sons moving from Bethlehem to Moab due to a famine in Israel. While in Moab, Elimelech dies, and Naomi's two sons marry Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Tragically, Naomi's sons also die, leaving Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth as widows. Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem after hearing that the famine in Israel has ended. She urges Orpah and Ruth to stay in Moab and remarry. While Orpah returns to her people, Ruth refuses to leave Naomi, showing her loyalty in a famous declaration. Ruth and Naomi return to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Chapter 2: Ruth meets Boaz. In Bethlehem, Ruth goes to glean in the fields to provide food for herself and Naomi. She happens to glean in the field of Boaz, a relative of Naomi's late husband. Boaz notices Ruth and, after learning of her loyalty to Naomi, shows kindness to her by allowing her to glean in his fields and offering her protection. He instructs his workers to leave extra grain for her to gather. Ruth is amazed at Boaz's kindness, and when she tells Naomi about him, Naomi is filled with hope. Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer, has the potential to restore their family. Chapter 3: Ruth's Request for Redemption. Naomi devises a plan for Ruth to seek Boaz's protection as her kinsman redeemer. A kinsman redeemer is a close relative who can marry a widow and restore the family line. Following Naomi's instructions, Ruth approaches Boaz at night on the threshing floor, asking him to spread the corner of his garment over her, symbolizing his role as her redeemer. Boaz is moved by Ruth's request and praises her for her virtue, but he informs her that there is a closer relative who has the right to redeem her first. He assures her that he will resolve the matter the next day. Chapter 4: Boaz redeems Ruth. Boaz goes to the town gate, where legal matters were settled, and meets the closer relative. He explains the situation, offering the man the opportunity to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth. The relative declines, fearing it would jeopardize his own inheritance, so Boaz steps in as the kinsman redeemer, agreeing to buy Naomi's land and marry Ruth. Boaz and Ruth marry, and they have a son named Obed, who becomes the grandfather of King David, placing Ruth in the royal lineage. The women of the town rejoice with Naomi, who now has a restored family through the birth of Obed. The book ends with a genealogy that connects Ruth to David, and ultimately to Jesus Christ, as revealed in the New Testament. Key themes: loyalty and kindness. The loyalty of Ruth to Naomi is one of the central themes. Despite the cultural expectation that she would return to her people after her husband's death, Ruth clings to Naomi and adopts her people and God. Boaz's kindness toward Ruth and Naomi also highlights the importance of compassion and care within the community. God's providence. Although God is not directly mentioned often in the story, his hand is seen in the way events unfold. From Ruth happening to glean in Boaz's field, to Boaz's willingness to redeem her, the story shows how God orchestrates events to bring about his purposes. Redemption. Boaz serves as a kinsman redeemer, a picture of Christ's redemptive work. Just as Boaz redeems Ruth and Naomi, restoring their family and providing a future, Jesus Christ is the ultimate redeemer who restores and saves humanity. Inclusion of the Gentiles. Ruth, a Moabite, is included in the covenant community of Israel and even becomes an ancestor of King David and Jesus. Her inclusion demonstrates God's plan to extend his grace and covenant blessings to all nations. Faithfulness in the ordinary. Ruth is a story of ordinary people living in difficult circumstances. The focus is not on great battles or kings, but on the faithfulness of individuals in everyday life. Ruth and Boaz's simple acts of faithfulness are part of God's larger plan of redemption. Conclusion. The Book of Ruth is a beautiful story of redemption, providence, and God's faithfulness. It shows how God works through the lives of faithful individuals, even in times of difficulty, to bring about his plans. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi, Boaz's kindness and redemption, and the birth of Obed are part of the grand story of salvation. culminating in the coming of Jesus Christ.